9, week 8, day 5. And you had 2 advanced lectures, I guess? No, 1. You only had 1. Yeah, so that was Davey doing the UI, UX stuff. Right. Yeah, you're like, wait, was this all core curriculum the past 8 weeks? So basically, with the advanced lectures, what I like to do is just kind of pick weird topics and dive into them. What I've done before is a lecture on like React Native. I don't like doing that lecture anymore, but that could be an option. Actually, no, I'll take that off. No React Native. What I've also done is a lecture on learning new tech post bootcamp and my tips for that through the lens of me learning to do machine learning stuff. Another one is a tech ethics workshop. Where basically, you know how sometimes you like hang out with your friends and you're like, but what about the robots? Like, what about the robots? I don't know if you ever find yourself saying that to your friends. But that's what this like workshop lecture session would be. Is we talk about all the different kinds of ways that tech and society intersect in more of like a group discussion situation. Or here's the last 2 options, which I will hook up my laptop and write them up in a second. We could host a mini hackathon. There's a thing called Battlesnake. Is anyone here familiar with what Battlesnake is? Yeah? Do you want to explain what Battlesnake is? That's exactly what it is. So Battlesnake is a big event in Victoria where people compete to write the best artificial intelligence for a 2D snake. So what you can do is I put on a bunch of music, I show you how to start making your snakes, and then you spend the next 2 hours making snakes that then fight against each other. I think it's a lot of fun. So the options here are, let me write these up. Here are the options. So option 1, we'll say tech ethics workshop / discussion. Battlesnake hackathon. Or another thing that we could do is Nima shows you tips and tricks with React plus working with APIs. Right. I will be doing, I'm pretty sure I'm scheduled for another advanced lecture like next week. So it's not like we only get one choice. But do you want to think for a sec? When I say tips and tricks with React, I mean things like React hooks, if you've heard what hooks are. I mean things like what we haven't done in the bootcamp so far is set up like an API and then talk to it with React. That's something that like a lot of you may be doing with your final project, so I don't know if you want to see tips on that. I am doing another advanced lecture next week, so maybe we could do the snake stuff next week. Right. Can I get a show of hands for who wants to do tech ethics? All right, Steve, you and I, we'll I don't know, grab a smoothie and we'll talk about robots. Yeah. We can technically talk about anything. It's very open-ended. Battlesnake hackathon. Who feels like doing that today? All right. 2 of you are on your own. No, sorry. Who feels like seeing tips and tricks with React? Cool. So fun fact about these 2 here is I have these prepared very well. This one here is very much guided by your input. Right? So I have a general idea of the things that I want to show you, but then it's very much on you to push me in different directions on this. Cool? OK, so let me open up a terminal here. We'll go to Documents. And we'll make a new directory. We'll call this week 8, day 5, advanced lecture. And we'll see it into there. 85. And work in VS Code. So, oh no, why is Twitter opening up? My computer is still broken, by the way. It's still slightly messed up, so deal with it, I guess. So I'll make a list of the things that I want to show you today in call this notes.md. Cool. Who feels dark theme and who feels light theme? Dark? Light? All right, dark. All right, so it is week 8, day 5. We're going to be talking about React and cool things with React, and also working with our own backends. So I want to start with maybe a little bit of a very, very quick review about what HTTP is. What does HTTP boil down to? Yeah, making requests. Can you say that again? Cool. Between a client and a server. So we have a client, we have a server. Who gets to make a request? The client. The client gets to make a request. The server does not. The server just waits. If you go to a restaurant, the people from the kitchen aren't going to show up and be like, yo, you want a burger? Like, you're supposed to ask, I guess, right? So making a request between a client and a server. So I really want us to think about the distinction about these things. These are going to be two different programs for us. The client is one thing. The server is another thing. Does the server care who the client is? No, sort of. The server just listens. And requests are coming in through a wire. Like, they're just coming in. They're coming in through a little window. The server might say, I only like requests from a particular address. Right? This looks like a RAR, like a little cat. Yeah, whatever. So from a particular address, particular address. A server has the option to say that. Like, I only like requests from particular addresses. Or I only like requests from people who are making requests over HTTPS. Okay? I only like whatever. For our purposes, what we'll probably want to do for the final project is just keep it really open and say the server can listen to anyone. Right? I'll listen to anyone. And then we'll have the client. Can the client only talk to one server? No, the client can talk to as many servers as it would like. Technically, the client doesn't even need a server. But if we want to interact with somebody, we will. So one or many servers to talk to. So we're going to be starting off focusing just on the client side. And our client is built with React. That's how we're going to build it. Now, you have used React in one specific context so far, and that was in building Chatty. Right? Chatty is a great project. It's super cool, but it doesn't exactly show you how it interacts with backends very well, especially because you only use a WebSocket server in that project. So we're going to be setting up Chatty to talk to, or not Chatty, but a React app to talk to an HTTP server. The first thing that I do when I start a React app is I use create React app. So nvm use node. Now, create React app is one way to initialize a React project. It's not the only way. React, at the end of the day, is very similar to jQuery in that it's a library that you bring in. It's just that React is just so much more powerful than jQuery that there's all this kind of like great tooling around it. For example, when you were working on your Tweeter project, every time that you made a change to your JavaScript stuff, what did you have to do? You had to like refresh the page, right? Every time you made a change to your jQuery stuff, you'd have to refresh the page to reload that JavaScript, right? In React, people came up with, hey, how about we have some hot reloading where every time you write some code, it'll refresh? Now, I want us to think about this. If I say that I have a React application, right? This is my React application. This is my computer, like where I'm typing. And every time I make a change and save, React refreshes. Right? React, this is the client. It's a client. But for some reason, it refreshes even though nobody has told the client to refresh. Right? Nobody from the client side has actually clicked and made a request. What does that mean? How does React, when you're working with it, know that it's time to refresh? Sure, when an element changes, so specifically like in your code when an element changes, right? Meaning maybe there is a program running on my machine that looks at the code that I'm writing. And if that code has changed and it's been saved, then it will tell React to refresh, right? To make the development process easier. But this thing here, how does this message get sent from here to here if the client never asked for it? Right? We've said that HTTP is the client asks for something and gets something back. But here I'm talking about me writing something and my client immediately refreshing. It's not my client asking for changes. It's me telling the client there's some changes. So what underlying mechanism needs to be here? Some WebSocket protocol, right? There's got to be like a WebSocket message that goes from my computer, the code that I'm writing, to tell the React application that it's time to refresh. And that is not something that's default in like a website or an application. Technically, you could have wrote your own thing when you're working on Tweeter that would watch your code and then send a WebSocket message to the front end to tell it to refresh. But it's not necessary for your application. It's only useful for when you're developing. Right? When we're working on our actual application, or not working, when we're deploying our actual application, we would rip out that useless WebSocket stuff because our clients, like our users, don't need it. So Create React App is a program, right, or it's a series of scripts that help set this process up, right? The watching of files and then letting the front end know when it's time to change. So what we have here is we have an actual secondary server, right? My project might be built up of a React app with, a backend built in Express or Rails or whatever. That's my like HTTP backend where all my actual stuff is happening. This thing here is what people will call like the Webpack dev server. And it's a server whose only purpose is to watch your code and tell the front end to reload. Right? It's a thing that you don't even really think about. But it's something I want you to know about as I build my project now, because I'm going to show you that there's two servers running. Right? One is the Webpack dev server, and the other one is my backend server. So I'm going to go here, and when I go create React app, I can give this any name I want. Nick, what project are you making today? Is it Egypt again? Yeah? Should we do EgyptMysteries.com? All right. So Egypt Mysteries. So I'll run create React app, and this is going to take a minute. It takes a little while, because React is a whole mess of things. There's not one simple little script, but it's a whole environment of stuff. So we just get to like look at each other for a little while. Hey, how are things? Well, this is downloading. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new window. And I have my Egypt Mysteries front end. What I also want is a back end. Right? So what do we want to do our back end in today? Do we want to do it in Rails or Express? Can we get hands up for Rails? All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Can we get hands up for Express? Ooh, close. Ryan, you didn't vote. What are you feeling? Rails? Oh, I can't hear. React? No, I can't. No, is it Rails or Express? Rails, OK. I'm sorry, it's Rails. So we're going to make a new project using Rails. Process for Express is going to be pretty much the same, and maybe we'll do something similar towards the end. To make a Rails backend in like API mode, we can go new, and then we can say --API to make a new API. Really, all an API is in Rails is your full stack application, except it doesn't have views. It just snips off the views. So it's a little bit lighter. And your controllers are a little bit lighter, too. Right? So you'll see it'll be like a slight, like very, very slight difference. So we're going to be making a new API project. This one here is going to be called Egypt backend. There's no testing. And my database is going to be PostgreSQL database. This is going to be my PostgreSQL. Right? You don't have to do this, but in my machine, just as I've messed up my environment, I need to load up Ruby first. So there we go. This is also going to take just a second to generate a new Rails project for me. Over on the React side, this one here has finished. And when you run create React app, which you haven't yet for like in the bootcamp, we gave you a boilerplate for Chatty, but it was built on something like this. When you run create React app, at the end it tells you, hey, you know what? You can run yarn start to start the development server. You can run yarn build to build your application to be ready for production. And I'll show you what these two steps do. So the first step here, though, is to go into the actual project, so Egypt mysteries. Do any of you know what yarn is? Yarn is just a better version of NPM. Anywhere where you see yarn, you could probably go NPM instead. So if I go NPM start, this is going to work fine. So what this is doing is it's running underneath a command called React scripts start. And this takes a second and it tells me, hey, I'm loading up the development server. Did you see this in Chatty? Something similar to this? That's an actual yes or no question. You did? Cool. So this is starting basically this part here. It's not the server that my application is actually built on. Like, it's not my backend. It's just a little server that watches my files and makes them public on an address. And if I make any changes, this little server is going to refresh the application. Right? Again, supposedly, though, I could tear out this server and just have to refresh the application by hand. So it takes a second. It loads it up on localhost 3000. And if I was to go to localhost 3000 now, I would see my initial React app. And boop, React, zap, we're there, right? This is our starting point for an application using create React app. Now, I'm going to, like I said for the first little bit, just focus on the React side, because there are some interesting things that I want to show you about React on its own. So you can go ahead. I'm just going to commit this stuff so that I don't get 51. Because the number just scares me. And I'm going to, at the moment, just show you the app.js for the front end of this. So create React app, what it does is it makes an application for you that has just a single app.js file. It also gives you like a whole structure of stuff. So this is my create React app project. It has an index.js. It has some weird logo. It has some setup CSS that I can start writing in. For the moment, though, I'm just going to care about the app.js. My app is a function. It's a functional component. What do you know about functional components so far? Functional components don't have state. or so you think. So functional components originally came about so that we could make components that didn't have state in like a nice short syntax. Over time, though, people liked functional components more than your usual class components. People just got really, really into it. But they still wanted to use state. So the people who made React came up with a way to inject state into your functional components. So right now, this functional component here shows me a div with a header and an image and yada, yada, yada. I'm going to get rid of all of this and just have a div, empty div. And in here, for my functional component, what I want to do is I want to render something like maybe an h1 that says maybe counter. And for this first example here, we're going to ignore Egypt, and we're going to make a counter. Now, if I had a stateful like class component, what I would do is I would have something to the tune of, and this is fake code at the moment, but I would have somewhere in my constructor something that said like this dot state equals, and I would go counter 0, right? In my state. The thing is, I'm not using a class component here, so I can't actually do this, right? And then if I wanted to actually see the value of my component of my counter, I would be able to go this dot state dot counter to see it. And I'd be able to update it by going this dot state set state. And I'd say take the counter and increase it so it's this dot state dot counter plus 1. It's fine. It just takes a bit of coding. And for really just increasing a single value, it feels like a little much. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to say const counter equals 0. I'm just going to show the counter here right now. So right now my counter is 0. I'm also going to have a button that goes click me. And what this button should do is on click it should run this function here. And in here is where I want to increase the counter. Now, if I was to say in here counter plus plus, right, on click, increase the counter like this, my React application doesn't actually it doesn't actually update the thing. In fact, it gets angry at me. Why does it get angry at me? Assignment to, oh, because I made this a const. Let me go let. So if I go click me, the point is I don't actually see anything happen. Because even though that value is changing, my React app is not able to just watch normal variables. We can only watch special variables. Right? We can only watch special variables and react to the changes of those. So one of the ways of doing that, we said, is putting stuff in state. But another way to do it is using these things called hooks, where instead of me going counter equals 0, I'm going to say let counter and set counter equals something. Specifically, I'm going to say use state 0. We're going to spend a good amount of time trying to figure out what this thing says. Now, at the moment, use state is not defined. Right? I just threw this code in here. Use state is something that's built into React. It's built into React. And what that lets me do is bring in this use state function. All I want you to see right now is that my code didn't break. That's all we care about right now, is that the code didn't break. The other thing that I care about is that the value here is 0. Where is the only place on here that I see 0? In use state. So if I was to change this, maybe this is the initial value. If I go 75, I get 75. So use state is going to say, make a stateful variable, right? Make a stateful variable. And also, here is the initial value of it. And ultimately, this thing here is the method that we can use, the function that we can use to change that variable. So I'm not able to go plus plus on the variable. But what I am able to do is I'm able to say on click, set counter to counter plus 1. And now what I get is I start at 0, but every time I click on this, it goes up. And without having to bring in a constructor and this dot state and all that, I'm able to do this more simple way of having stateful stuff inside of functional components. Right? This is very new. This is super, super new. This came out very recently in React. People are big fans of it. And this is just one example of what a hook in a React component is. Now, this syntax here, is anybody here confused by the syntax? Me too. Right? Basically, what useState does is it sends back an array. Right? I'm going to do this demo in the console. So if I was to make a function, we'll go make counter. This is plain JavaScript. This is not React at the moment. A function called make counter. And what make counter does is it returns an array. Specifically, the stuff in the array is going to be an object. So we're going to say let data equals, it's going to be an object with a value that maybe starts off at 0. So I can return that data. And then the other thing that I have in here is a function. We're going to call this set data, where what set data does is it takes in a number, and it says, hey, given this number, we're going to say that data.value equals that number. You've actually dealt with something similar to this before. If I was to return set data, what is this idea called? When I make a function that returns another function. You're going to have to think way back to like week 2. So this is a function that returns another function which refers to a variable inside of this function. Not a callback. It's called a closure. Right? It's called a closure. And what a closure means is let's say just this on its own. So we're going to say return set data for the moment. Make counter is a function. When you call it, you get the return value, which is set data. That return value is this thing here. Now, if this function here was just a normal, clean function with inputs and outputs and no access to global variables, then it would be OK. Right? If we were to look at our stack, when you have variables, so say this is I call a function, and in this place here, I make a bunch of variables like number and friends and other stuff. And if I have a function in here that refers to these things, like number, and I take this and I send it out and then clear everything else, there's no such thing as number anymore, so I should run into an error when I try to run the function, because it's referring to something that doesn't exist anymore. But JavaScript is smart. JavaScript looks at the function that you're about to return and says, oh, you're referring to something that's about to disappear. So I'm going to take that thing and I'm going to save it in a special place. And that process is called creating a closure. Right? It's a confusing concept, and I don't want you to be comfortable with it. I just want you to have heard that word before. Right? Or I want you to associate at least the word closure with a function that returns another function. Now in this case here, I'm returning this function that refers to data, which is about to disappear. Right? Technically, I can still catch that data and say, return an array of both the data and the function. And what I get here is when I go, here's a counter, so make counter. Oh, whoops, I mean, that was a mistake. Actually, if I look at counter right now, it's an array of two things. Right? There's counter dot, and then this would be counter 0 dot value, which is 0. And there's counter 1, which is that function for setting the value. It's super awkward for me to have to index things like this all the time. So instead, what we would do is, when we run it, you can destructure the output by going, this is what I'm going to call the first thing, and this is what I'm going to call the second thing. So the convention when we're talking about React hooks is to go, hey, here's the counter. Let me actually just refresh this so I can use better words. So here's the counter, and here's the function for setting the counter. So the data is going to be saved in counter, and set data is going to be saved in set counter. I can name this thing anything I want, but it's nicer convention-wise if I call it set variable. And now what I have is that my counter is at 0. It's an object with a value at 0. And when I go set counter to 3, now when I look at my counter, it's 3. I have a function and a variable that are tied together. Right? I could go set counter to counter plus 1. Counter val plus 1. And now when I look at my counter, it's 4. Right? That's what React hooks are doing, is when you say use state, it returns to you both a variable. It returns to you both a variable and a function that is tied to that variable. The function is tied to the variable, and then React does the work of making sure that it updates its visual. It re-renders to update itself with the value there. So I could have as many of these little counters as I want. Here's another thing. Counter 2 and set counter 2. And down here, I might have both a counter 1 and a counter 2. If I wanted to, this would be set counter 2 to counter 2 plus 1. And now over on my React side, I have one click me that controls one, and the other click me that controls the other one. Okay. So I can introduce as much state as I want into my application now, into this functional component with useState. Does that mean that you should always use functional components? I mean, you could try. I like using functional components just because I think they're cool. The syntax just looks nicer to me. And my components tend to be a little bit smaller. Right? I get a little overwhelmed when I see things like component will mount and all that. Right? Which I don't necessarily need to do with this. Is this use of hooks making sense? So we're going to be using hooks to do something else. Specifically, what we're going to do is we're going to set our application up to retrieve data from my Rails backend. So let me save this here. Well, not delete it, but I'll save it in here. I'll paste it just way down at the bottom of the page. There you go. Just down at the bottom of the page. And I'm going to clear this out. So for my application, I think what's really going to help us is if we start off with the user stories of what we want this thing to do, right? And that way I can decide how to actually build this. So we came up with, was it last time, the idea of a website where you can see Egyptian mysteries and the pyramids that they're associated with. So to me, it makes sense to maybe have a screen. And say, when a user goes to the home page, what they should see is, a big old pyramid, because that's our logo. And it should say things like, welcome to, welcome, and all that. And maybe on this side over here, what I want to have is like a catalog of pyramids. So I'm going to have a catalog of the particular pyramids that exist. And maybe when I click on one of the pyramids, it should show me the pyramid itself. So we'll do that under here. When you click on one of the pyramids, it'll show you the pyramid itself. So this is special. The Smiling Pyramid of Giza. And then it should show me like a list of all the mysteries. And as I click on the mysteries, maybe they'll expand, right? Like it could toggle open or something like that and show me the stuff that's inside. And then, there might be like a back button or something like that. What I'm seeing here is that there's likely 2 screens. Right? There's likely one screen for the home page that shows me all of the pyramids. Right? So I might say that the home page is like pyramids. And then there's one down here which is for pyramids, but then a specific pyramid. So maybe a pyramid with an ID or a name or something to see all the mysteries. I could also maybe say, if I wanted to, as one of my stories, that like there's also a page for the particular mystery. Right? We may or may not get there, but this is where I want to be right now. So 2 screens. Now, in React, when you've worked with Chatty, you didn't have screens. Right? We had just one big component. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and have different screens that exist for this application. Now, at the moment, my React app is one page. You've heard the term single page. What does single page mean when we say a single page application? There's only one page, but specifically one page of what's the extension of that page? I guess I mean more like the file type. So that's the problem. One HTML file. Single page website means there's one HTML file. Right? When I go to this and I look at what I get back, I only get back a single HTML page. And as I move around on my page and go to different screens, I only see one HTML page. Specifically, if I was to go to, let's go to YouTube. And I'm here in my inspector for YouTube. Let's wait while the thing loads. So here's my inspector for YouTube. I mean, honestly, you watch one stand-up comedy video, and then that's all you kind of really get. And lo-fi hip-hopper. So yeah. So what I want to show you is that if I was to check my network, and refresh this page, among the requests that I get, there is really only this first HTML page. Right? Everything else is not HTML. Right? Let me see if I can show you that. I don't know how to actually show that to you. The response here is HTML, but everything else is going to be JavaScript. Right? Everything else is going to be JavaScript or just random data and CSS. Right? But we're not really going to find any more HTML here, and that's fine. What's interesting is that if I go to a different page here, let's go to Lo-Fi Hip Hop Radio. Notice how I haven't in here navigated to another page. Like, this thing has not refreshed. And if I go down, I'm going to see all that really happens is that it keeps asking for more data. I'm going to keep this open to the side so you can see this happening in real time. When I go to a different page, so keep your eye on what's going on down here. As soon as I click on this, a bunch of requests get made, but they're all requests that are just for data. Requests for images. There's going to be a request in here for video playback that gets back whatever the heck this response is. Right? At the end of the day, this project here is it's something like a React application, but it's a single page application, meaning that if you were to dig through a React project, the only HTML file you would find is inside of public, and it's called index.html. That's the only file. In TinyApp, when we had multiple screens, we had to have multiple HTML files, or we called them EJS files there. In Tweeter, we only had one screen. And in Chatty, we only had one screen. So here, I want to make it seem as if I have multiple screens. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to bring in something called React Router. Have any of you looked at React Router yet? How many of you feel like you have just the best grasp of what React Router does so far? You already do? All right, Stevie, come on up and do the lecture. So what React Router is going to do is it's going to give me the ability to simulate screens or different pages. It's going to give me the ability to simulate that. I'm going to go into npm. I'm going to say npm install, and I'm going to bring in the React Router stuff. It's going to take a sec. When this is done, what I will have is I will have access to import from React Router doc. We'll have something that we're going to be importing in. Specifically, we're going to be bringing in a thing called the browser router that we're going to be renaming to router, just to keep things short. We're going to have a route and a link thing, and we'll see what that does. So I'll put that in here for now. Wow, that's slow, eh? So slow. In the meantime, I'm going to think about these two different screens, and I'm going to build them out as components. I'm going to build this component as if it was the only one being shown on the page, and I'm also going to build this one as if it's the only one being shown on the page. So I might do that here. I might say const pyramids, or home screen. Home screen is going to be something that returns basically a big div with an image in it. Where'd you go? With an image in it, source. And it's also going to have like an H1 that says, welcome to Egypt mysteries.com. And underneath it, I might want to have maybe a div. A div with like a list of all the different mysteries or whatever, right? So I can start by hard coding this stuff, or all the different pyramids. I can start by hard coding this stuff. I think a pyramid is going to be done such that it's an H2 with a name. So the Great Pyramid of Giza. And then maybe we'll keep it at that for now, but we might add stuff to this later. Since this thing here, we're going to have lots of these. Oh no, my computer completely froze. I've still got a mouse. All right. While it waits to unfreeze, This thing here, I'm going to extract that to a component on its own so that I can render like a, there we go. Oh, you're back. I'm going to extract that to a component on its own so we can render like a whole list of these. Right. So I'll say maybe like a const pyramid entry maybe is going to take something like a name. Right. It'll have a name and maybe an ID. Right. Some things. Those are going to be the props being passed in, and this is just going to return a div like that. That says something like, here's the name. Yeah. All right, it finally finished running. So I can go npm start to start this thing up. What I should see at the moment is an empty screen, because that's all that my app is at the moment. And that's all that's being rendered is just an empty screen. If I want to actually use my React router stuff, I'm going to need to put the React router stuff in here. Let me make a second screen just for that other one, which is a pyramid screen. And in here right now, I'm just going to say that this is a screen for a pyramid. And this is going to be a screen for a particular pyramid. Maybe I'll make another one that's called like about screen that says about us and information in there. I want to register those things within here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be able to say, first of all, the app itself needs to be wrapped, or it needs to have a router in it that wraps all of the content. This router is a component that doesn't actually render anything. If I go here, I'm not actually seeing anything. But what I can do inside of the router is I can paste routes. For example, I might paste in the route slash shows the home screen component. The route about shows the about screen component. Before we even look at what this actually does, writing out this code here, what does it remind you of? This kind of thing where I say this route matches to this thing that you should do. Yeah, backend routing. It's very similar to what you do in Express, where I'm saying, when you see this, this is what you do. And the thing is here, we're not working with the backend. We're working on the front end, and we're just saying, hey, the URL on the front end, let's use that to control what component gets shown, right? It's not actually making HTTP requests. What it's doing is it's deciding what should be shown on the page. So when we have slash show the home screen, when we have slash about show the about screen, and what I see here now is that when I'm on slash or just root, it says welcome to egyptmysteries.com, which is that home screen. But when I go to slash about, it shows me the about us page, even though this is all the same, like the same page. Right? It's the one React app, but it's rendering two different things. At the moment, I don't have a way to navigate between these two things without clicking. So what I might do is up at the top, I might make a couple different links to link between. If I was to do an A tag, if I was to do a regular A tag to link between them, so maybe this one here goes to slash, and it says home. And this one here might say, this is the about. So go to about. There's nothing immediately wrong about this, except for the fact that as I click on these links, keep your eye trained on that. It refreshes. And that defeats the purpose of a React application. Because a React application isn't supposed to reload. It's supposed to re-render parts of itself. So a normal A tag, it defeats the purpose. It's not proper. Instead, what I would like to do is hijack an A tag and tell it to render something different. So React Router gives me access to these link tags instead. If instead of saying A, I say link, and instead of saying href, I say to, now what I get on my screen is broken. I forgot to change this to link. Now what I got on my screen is virtually identical in a visual way. But when I click on these, I want you to see that when I click on about, that thing here refreshes. That refreshes. But when I click on home, that thing does not refresh. So I can make these all link tags now. Link tags so that when I'm clicking on both of these, they don't actually, oh, whoops, I forgot to change this to 2. When I click on both of these, they take me to different screens, even though there's really just one page. Does this idea make sense? Right? So what I would like to do is have really complicated home screen and about screen. Like those are going to get really complicated. They're big components probably. So I might want to move them out and make a new component like file, like the home screen.js. And I know when you were working in Chatty, you use the extension JSX. Create React app is happy with JS. They're just happy with it. It's OK. So I might make a home screen. I might make an about. In my case, there was a pyramid screen. What's that? The pyramid scheme? Yeah. So here's my pyramid screen. If I have a lot of screens and a lot of smaller components, it can get overwhelming to just have all this stuff laid out here. So my tip is to make a folder called screens where you put that stuff in. Right? You're going to find that as you work in React, there's no set way for how you have to structure your folders. There's just no set way. When you were working in Rails, they told you, you have to do this. Like you have to put your controllers there, or you have to put your models here. React is a lot looser, so it's going to be up to you to come up with a structure. Often, what ends up happening is your structure will just change over time to accommodate for the issues that you're running into. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to take my home screen and put it in screens. I'm going to take my pyramid screen, and I'm going to put it in screens. And I will move over the code for that. So my pyramid screen is in here. My home screen is in here. And I was never using my about screen in the first place, so we'll just get rid of that. And my pyramid entry was going to be on my home screen page anyways, so I'll just do that there. Now, I need to import these things now. So I'm going to have to say import home screen from screen/home screen, and the same thing for my pyramid screen. I'm going to need to import them. I'm going to need to use them first of all. So home screen, and for my pyramid screen, I want it to be at /pyramids /some ID, right? How would I have done that in Express? There we go. Happy time, right? Pyramid /ID will take me to pyramid screen. Let me get rid of this counter. And then the other thing that I'm going to do is, at the moment, when I'm doing these things, I don't have React imported. So we'll do import React from React on both of these. And the purpose of that is that your app will just get angry if you write some JSX in a place that doesn't have React imported. And then ultimately, these things need to be exported so that I can actually use them outside. So export the pyramid screen and export the home screen. Default. There you go. Now what I have over here is my home shows welcome to egyptmysteries.com, and my /pyramids/12, for example, will show me a screen for a pyramid. Right? If I did /pyramid/ blah, 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 that's also a scheme for a pyramid. So we've now started successfully building up the front end of this thing. Right? On this page here, I want to show the pyramids anyways, so I'm going to have to fetch those. And on the page for the pyramid itself, I want to show the information for the pyramid, so I'll have to fetch that as well. It is 10:58. I think what we'll do is, if this feels good, we can take a break here. During the break, I will style the page so it looks nice, so you don't have to wait for me to do that during the second part of the lecture. And we can spend the second half of the lecture fetching data from the API. Right? Has what we've seen so far, has it been useful? Right? I am firmly of the belief that it's really hard to build a React application that has multiple screens without React Router. Prove me wrong, by all means, go for it. I will be very impressed. But I'm very much of the opinion that I've had a hard time building apps without React Router. So do spend a little bit of time going into that. We're going to talk about React Router more in the second half, specifically when I need to talk about how do I get this number, right, to show particular things on the screen. Good? Cool. So we'll get back together at, let's do 11:10. All right, welcome. Whoops. Welcome. When we last left off, this is what it looked like. I did just a minimal amount of styling so that I've had people complain about my projects looking bad before. This is so much better, right? I mean, the colors that they put in HTML, like the default HTML colors, those are the best colors. Why else do you think they picked them? Why would I want some random hexadecimal version of blue when I can just say blue? It's the bluest blue and the yellowest yellow. So what I did was I did something that looked sort of like what we have here, where it's split in half. And I used Flexbox to do it. So if you want to look at how that works, then that's cool. Important bits are that I have a screen. So this used to be called a div. I replaced it to be called a screen. And what I did was, instead of making a div with a class name called screen, where I would write the styles in the CSS, I brought in a special library called styled components that let me write components that have style injected into them. This is not a thing that's built into React. You have to bring in a library for it. I'm doing this so that instead of having to jump between CSS files and my JavaScript stuff, I can just write it in one place. Right? If you want to look up how styled components work, by all means do. It's not integral to this lecture, though. So this thing looks, I mean, really the same as before, but what I want is, like as far as content goes, what I want is the list of the pyramids here. Right? I just want a bunch of them. Now, where do the pyramids live? All right, go to Egypt and get me some pyramids and come back. No, the pyramids are going to live on our back end. Right? We don't currently have any pyramids in the back end yet, but we would have to. Wow, that is nice and quiet. Just going to wait a sec. Shows no signs of stopping. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my Rails side, which is here where the project had finished installing, cd into it, create my create the database that I'm supposed to be working with. And then I'm going to start by building the actual pyramid models that exist. Now, I think it's a bit of a jump for us to go straight into building the pyramids on the back end and fetching them all at once. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up one simple route on the back end that returns back some hard-coded data. Right? Single simple route. On that route, so that's going to be in routes.rb. I want to say something like maybe, wow, whenever somebody makes a request to a particular get route or a post route or something like that. To save myself a little bit of time, I'm going to render those routes or generate those routes by saying that maybe there's a bunch of pyramids routes. So when I was to check my rake routes right now that I've added that into the route file, what I get is a list of existing routes for pyramids. They're pointing somewhere. They're pointing to some controllers. Those controllers don't exist right now. Great. So what I can go ahead and do is in my controllers, I can make a new controller. Right? I can make a new controller for my pyramids. I'm going to let Rails do the work for that. So I'm going to go Rails generate controller pyramids. And what that's going to do is over here, it's going to generate a new file for me, unless it threw an error. Nope. It's going to generate a new file for me called pyramids controller. And in here, I'm going to make a single route at the moment, def index, that at the moment, all this does is it puts onto my terminal, it puts, hey, you hit me. That's what it's going to put. You hit me. How do I, from outside, how do I access this route? What kind of request do I need to make? And if I don't know, what steps do I go through to find out what kind of request I make? But so a GET request, and then what's the route? So I could go in here, I could run rake routes like I did before, and I can look through here and see when you make a GET request to /pyramids. Right, so let me make this a little smaller so you can see how it's formatted here. When you make a GET request to /pyramids, right, that's going to be, where did they put it? Oh, there it is, all the way over here. That's going to be a request to pyramids index. So anything that I write in here, that's what's going to happen when somebody makes a GET request to /pyramids. Now that I have that going, I can go Rails S. I can start this up. My Rails project is running. If I was to go to localhost, where does Rails run? It runs on 3000, which is that's awkward. It's awkward because my React project is running on 3000 as well. So I could change the path that my React project is running on. But what I think I'd rather do is change the path that my Rails project is running on. How do I do that? app.js is for my React. Maybe it's in a coffee file. What's that? It's in some config folder, so I could dig around in here and find out where it is. Right? Maybe it's in boot.rb. Doesn't look like it. Maybe application.rb, and I could scroll through here. Still doesn't really look like it. You know what the easiest way to do it is? Search all files for what? For the word localhost? Yep. That's one way to do it, maybe. And here I see localhost 6379, so that's not it. Localhost 3000, but that's in a README. Service worker, still not it. I think the easiest way to do it is to search for the number 3000. Because I just want to change that number 3000. So I'll find that Puma. Who knew? The Puma RB file, whatever it is. That's apparently where they say, oh, the default is 3000, but what if I change this to 3001? Now when I run my project, it's running on 3001. Right? Hot tip. When you're trying to figure out how to change a configuration, just search for the number you're trying to change. Right? That's where you'll find where it is. So now when I go to localhost 3001/pyramids, I'm not getting a response back yet, but what I do get in the terminal is, you hit me. Right? And I could refresh, like, again, localhost 3001, and I get another one, you hit me. I accidentally clicked on a link there. So what I want to do is I want to have my React application make that request. I want my React application to hit my Rails project. How did we make requests in Tweeter? Ryan, how did we make requests in Tweeter? Yeah. How did we fetch? Thanks. We used Ajax, right? Now the thing about Ajax is that it's not a default JavaScript thing. Ajax, that Ajax request thing, that function is built into something else. What was it built into? No, so the Ajax function like that, it could make, I guess I phrased it wrongly. There is no way for us to just get the Ajax function on its own. we had to install something else to use the AJAX function. Is that? Yes, our good friend McQuery. Right. One day that joke will land. Our good friend jQuery, that's who gave us access to AJAX. We're not using jQuery. We're not. So what we have access to by default is a thing called fetch. Fetch is garbage. It's hot trash. This thing works, but it's so hard to use. I hate it. If you want to use fetch for your project, by all means. I'm just not going to help you. No, I will. Like, I'll help you out, but expect me to run into some issues. In the same way that doing the document query selector was a lot of work, so we bring in jQuery to do that, fetch is a lot of work, so we can bring in something else. For example, AJAX or Axios. Axios is a library that lets me make requests easily. And we'll see what that means. So over on the Node side, on the React side, I'm going to npm install this thing called Axios. That's going to take hopefully less than 40 seconds this time. And I'll show you what Axios is. Axios is a library. It's a library that lets me make any HTTP request. So it's going to look pretty much identical to what you did with the $get, $post, or even $AJAX. Axios get. Nothing really new to learn here, except for the fact that when I want to make a request from React, I need to actually write that request. So over on wherever I want to make that request, such as in my, let's say my home screen, for example, I might want to say that I have like a, let's say when the application starts, or when the screen just starts, one of the things that it does is it makes an Axios get request to, and I'm running my current thing on HTTP localhost 3001/pyramids. Right. I'm just going to make that request. I'm not going to do anything with it. It fires off this request. Do requests happen synchronously? No, they don't. So if I wanted to catch the response from this, I'm going to need to do some extra work. Right now, though, I'm just saying make the request and don't do anything with it. Axios get. I'm going to need to also bring in Axios. So import Axios from Axios. When I start this now, oh no, not npm install. When I start my application up now, what I have is a thing that says, whenever my home screen, whenever my home screen loads, return this, but also just make a random Axios request. I should see in a bit is when this page loads here, if I was to check the inspector and see the errors that I get. Oh, OK, this is fine. This is totally fine. If I was to look at my network, what happens when I refresh this is at some point here, there is a request being made to, where are you at? There's a request being made to pyramids, localhost 3001 pyramids. Let's zoom way in on that. OK, wow. Localhost 3001 pyramids. That's the request that I'm making. Now, I'm getting back no data right now because my endpoint doesn't say anything about data. And if I was to look in my terminal, what I would like to see on the Ruby side is you hit me. And that is what I'm getting. If I refresh this page again, pretty sure, let's see, I clear this. If I refresh this page again, I get you hit me. And you hit me. And I might want to send some data back. Now, not just say you hit me, but send some stuff back. I can go into my pyramids controller, and for my pyramids controller, to send data back that's going to be render JSON. And then I can write any hash that I want. Here's a message that says, hello, world. And now what should be happening is when I refresh this thing, I should get back a response that says hello world. So what I've done here is I've connected a React application to a Rails application. And that connection, I think the thing that's underwhelming about it is that there isn't some big crazy thing you need to do. You still have your routes on the back end, but the routes, instead of rendering views, what they do is they say render JSON. Right? Very, very similar to what you had in Express being app.json. Res.json. Right? Very similar. And then on the React side, it's identical to what you did with Tweeter, except instead of being $get or $Ajax with a get, it is instead Axios get. Now, if I wanted to show this message on the screen, unfortunately, I can't just do this and then show the message in here, like data.message or whatever, because these things, there's like a synchronous issue. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to bring in hooks again. One of the things that hooks lets me do is I get to write asynchronous stuff inside of a functional component. Right? Specifically, the way this is going to work is I'm going to start off by saying const message and set message is, and then what am I supposed to write on this side? Use state with an initial value. So use state, and I'm going to write something like waiting for message. Right? I need to make sure that use state is actually imported. Right? So that's the first thing I'm going to do. So this way here, I'm showing something that says waiting for message. And then the next thing I want to do is I want to say, make this request. What's that? Oh, the colors? Sorry, man. The next thing I want to do is I want to say, make this request. And the data that comes back, I want you to set that as the message. So I can do Axios get, and then you can go .then, and you get some data, and I can console.log the data. That is something that I can do. Oops. And in fact, what I'm going to see when I check the console here is absolutely nothing. That's OK. I mean, the request is being made, eh? The request is being made. But for some reason, I'm still getting this error. And you saw me hand wave this error earlier. Right? I kind of looked at it, and I'm like, oh, that's OK. I expected that, and I moved on. So unfortunately, what happens is there's this thing called the cross-origin resource sharing policy, which stops you, when you have a page, it stops you from connecting to other servers that are not running through the same domain as you. Right? So somebody can't I can't inject code into a website that then goes to talk to a server that's not whitelisted to be talked to. Or I could also think of it as rather, I can't access a server that hasn't explicitly said I'm allowed to access it. We're getting back to that idea way up at the top of the lecture where I said a server can decide who it wants to talk to. So what I need to do is I need to go into my server, and I need to actually change this cross-origin resource sharing. Oh my god, why did Safari open? I have no idea. I need to change this cross-origin resource sharing thing to allow people to make requests from me. And in fact, if I was to read the configuration here, and it's something I recommend you do in Rails, is read the config files when you get to them. They'll tell you, oh, let's avoid CORS issues when the API is called from a front-end app. For example, when somebody tries to do an AJAX request, like we're trying to do right now. You can read more here, or I could just uncomment all of this stuff and go, woo, and be happy with it. What this is saying is allow origins from example.com. Or what I might do is allow origins from anywhere. No, yeah. I'm going to allow origins from anywhere right now. I invite you to look up how the different configurations for this can be set. But we're going to do anywhere right now. If I refresh this thing right now, I still get an error because I haven't restarted my server. Configurations only get applied when you start your server. So I go here, I turn off Rails, I turn it back on. Fingers crossed when I do this next. Whoops. Fingers crossed when I do this next, it works. It didn't, though. In fact, what I got was a whole big error. And the error here that I get is uninitialized constant rack cores. The thing is, the cores stuff is not automatically installed. It's in the configuration, but you have to actually install it yourself. You would find that out if you were to read it into the documentation here. What I do is, well, how do we install things in a Rails application? Into the gem file. So I go into the gem file. Oh my god. The gem file. There's going to be one for rack cores. Untoggle it. And then I get to run bundle. So I ran bundle install, run Rails S again. Hopefully don't get any errors. Didn't get an error. When I refresh this thing, I get back the data. Right? And the console log was triggered properly. I want you to realize that as you're working on your final projects, you're going to run into a lot of problems. Like a lot. Because you're all going to be trying things that we haven't done in bootcamp. That's totally fine. What I encourage you to do is work forward in an error-driven way. Right? Errors are good because they tell you what you should be doing. Right? Like 95% of the time, they're good. So don't get too scared off by that kind of stuff because there's always going to be an answer to it. Right? It's just as you get more and more and more specific, it's less of the kind of thing that you can learn in a lecture style, and it's more the kind of thing that you just have to learn by breaking things apart and reading the docs. So I have my data. Hello world is coming back properly. And I can actually access it in my application here by console logging data or data.message. Now what I get back is the actual message. Oh, no. It was response. I called it data, but it should be called response. So you can go response.data.message. There you go. So I'm getting hello world. If you were to dig apart what the response object looks like, you'll see that it has data inside of it, and then data has more stuff. And what I want to do here is I want to set the message, correct? I want to go, OK, const message, received is that thing, and I want to go something like set message with received. So that hopefully on the screen what I should see is no longer waiting for message, but rather hello world. And that is what I got. Yay! And you even see it flicker for a second because it's retrieving the stuff and then displaying it on the screen. If I was to check the thing here, though, sometimes you find that this gives you like an error. Or, we'll explore this in a bit. If I need to trigger this effect on a click, for example, if I have a button that clicks and receives some stuff, then I'll want to trigger this effect to happen. Any side effect, such as going to fetch something from a database or from a server or something, we're going to call that an effect in React. And what you're going to have to do is you're going to find yourself, in some cases, having to wrap these requests in a thing called useEffect. what use effect does is it says anytime that one of the values in here changes, anytime that one of these values changes, I want us to make this request here. And I'm telling you about that right now. I'm going to show it to you in action as we go into the pyramids page. Yeah. So at the moment here, these are the messages coming back. If I was to go on my back end, so use, and I was to run some commands to maybe go Rails generate model, and this would be pyramids, and then another one that's Rails. Whoops. Oh, I'm not in the right place. Sorry. CD Egypt backend. Rails generate model pyramid, and then maybe I'll do the Rails generate model mystery as well. And we'll reuse like a little bit of the idea from last time, which is that my pyramid migration here is going to have a t.string for its name and a t.string maybe for its description. In my seeds, I might make a bunch of pyramids by going pyramid.create with a name such as the Great Pyramid and a description like, whoa, it big though. And then we'll make a couple other pyramids. Carlo, you want a pyramid? All right, this is Carlo's pyramid. So this is Carlo's pyramid. What's your description? Yeah, it's nice. And then we'll make another one. Anybody want a pyramid in here? Nice. All right. So Steve's pyramid. Steve G's. Yes. Yes. We don't want to make that mistake. And then what's the description here? It's amazing. Cool. So we'll have 3 pyramids for now. And so here are my pyramids. I want those in the seeds. I want them in the database. This is going to be built up of, wait, did I make a mystery model as well? Right, so we'll make some mysteries. The mystery is going to have a t.integer, which is the pyramid ID. It's going to have a t.name, t.string, which is the name, and maybe a t.string, which is a description, name, description, and the pyramid it belongs to. For my pyramid model, I'm going to say that every pyramid has many mysteries. Every pyramid has many mysteries, and every mystery has or belongs to a pyramid. Set up those associations nicely, and then ultimately in the seeds, what I'm going to do is create a couple mysteries. So here's a mystery. There's a name. Oh, actually, I could do this way. mysteries.create, so that this mystery is for that pyramid. So what's the name of the first mystery for the Great Pyramid? There's a mummy. Description. It's in the title, really. And we'll do another one. Who made it? Was it difficult to make? Carlo, are there mysteries in your pyramid? So the mystery is called Why, and the description is why did they give Carlo a pyramid? Any other mysteries? Yeah, JavaScript. Description? Yeah, is it? And then Steve, what are your mysteries? Yeah, why is it so amazing? Any description? Just cuz? Yeah, and then what's your second mystery? All right, what's it made out of? What's it made out of? And what is it made out of? Rocks, mostly. Cool. So we've got some seeds, we've got our migrations. I'm going to run the migrations. Rails, or rake, db, migrate to run the migrations. And then I want to run the seeds as well. Rake, db, seed. And all of this is for the purpose of me being able to fetch some pyramids. So pyramid.all, for example, returns 3 pyramids, if I check the count. So I want to return pyramids from Rails. So what I'm going to do is over on the pyramid controller, my God, PyCon, on the pyramid controller, instead of rendering a message that says hello world, I would like to return a list of all the pyramids. And for me to get the pyramids, I can go, well, the pyramids is pyramids.all. Maybe I want to filter them or whatever. That's cool. Right now, I'm just going to grab all of them. What I'm going to find is that over on the React side now, when I make this request, I'm not looking for response.data.message. I'm looking for pyramids. Right? So I want to console.log. What are the pyramids that I got? What are the pyramids that I got? And I go here and I refresh, getting an internal server error. Oh no. We can always find out what that server error is by clicking on this. Seeing that this is 500. This thing here at the moment, the response like this doesn't really tell me very much because it's a big HTML file. Hot tip, when you're working I mean, the same thing is going to go for Express as well. But if you click on preview, it'll show you what error you're getting. What's my error right now? Yeah, there's a typo in here technically. How am I supposed to write this? Pyramid, right? It's a singular pyramid for the model. So over on my controller, my pyramids controller, I'm going to replace this and say pyramid.all. And it's as simple as then me just refreshing and getting back an array of pyramids with a great pyramid, description, and all that. Right? I want you to see that your workflow when you're working with these two separate things, when you're working with a front end and a back end, can be really smooth. Right? Make a quick change somewhere and then just make the request again. Right? The same thing's going to be the case in Express. Right? With Express, you'll have NodeMon running, and your application will just reboot. And you can just continuously make these requests. If I wanted to render each one of these pyramids over on the home screen, what I can do is I can have, instead of this message, I can have the pyramids and set pyramids. What should the initial value of my pyramids be? It could be an empty array. Right? And then what I want to do here is update, so pyramids from API, use that to update what's in there. Over in here, I might want to do something like pyramids.map and say that for each pyramid, what I want to do is I want to render a pyramid entry with the name coming as p.name. What I'm going to get is when this thing refreshes, I get all of the pyramids on the screen. Right? So to take you through that slowly again, what I have is the request is being made. The request gets made. The stuff that comes in gets set. And then I'm looping over each of the pyramids that are in there, whether it's an empty array or not. And for each pyramid, I'm making a new pyramid entry, which was that component that I'd made way up before that takes a name. Yeah. So now each of these pyramids is here. Got the Great Pyramid, I've got Carla's Pyramid, I've got Steve G's Pyramid. And I might want to see the mysteries for each pyramid. So I would like to probably click on each of these pyramids and have it take me somewhere. What do I have to do for that? I have to use a link to, right? So I could take a link to, I could put it maybe around this H2 and say that each one of these is going to be a link to something. What should it be a link to? What's that? It should be a link to the pyramid ID, but specifically /pyramids plus then the ID, right? If I was to write this nicely using fancy strings, I could say, okay, it's a link to pyramids and then the ID. I can get the ID if it's passed in as a prop. So what I can go do in my pyramid entry is say, hey, the ID is p dot, and then every one of my pyramids has an ID that gets passed along anyways. So what I have now is when this thing refreshes, oh no, link is not defined. What am I supposed to do now that link is not defined? Why would Sublime open? Oh no, you know why? It's because I clicked on this. What? But that's not Sublime. All right. I need to import I need to import link. I need to import link from React Router DOM so that I can actually use that link. Now what we're going to see is when this thing refreshes, nope. Yeah, when this thing refreshes, each of these is a nice little link. Right? You know? Maybe we'll pick a different color than blue. Rebecca purple. Nice. So we've got the Great Pyramid, Carla's Pyramid, Steve G's Pyramid. Each of these happens to be a link, and when I click on it, it takes me to Pyramids 1. This one took me to Pyramids 2. Right? So each one of these is taking me somewhere special. I want to see maybe some information about the pyramid here. Right? I want to see the mysteries. So I'll start by trying to see if I can display just the number 1 on this page. I'm going to go to the pyramid screen. A screen for pyramid 1, right? Hacker, I got it. Screen for pyramid 1, that's an easy way to do it. And then when we go to pyramid 2, though, it still says pyramid 1. So evidently not the solution. If I look at the React Router documentation, one of the things that they have for me here is URL parameters in the examples. Right? And this is going to look very, very similar to what you did in Express. What did we do in Express to get the parameters? Yeah, say that louder for everyone, though. That was quieter, actually. Yeah. It's rec.params, right? In React Router, though, it will be match.params. Right? So as long as I have a match property going in, it'll be match.params. Meaning that over here for my pyramid screen, I can go match. And then I will say for pyramid, match.params dot, and then the thing that it is. For example, I set ID. And now what I get here is, for each one of these, it'll say a screen for pyramid 2, a screen for pyramid 5, right? Screen for pyramid 1. OK, 12. That thing updates itself. So very, very similar to rec.params, it'll be match.params. What do I want to do with that ID? Is there something specific that I want to do? I want to get the pyramid and the mysteries for that pyramid. So what I might do is I might, inside of the pyramid screen here, have something like const mysteries and set mysteries. Right? Const mysteries, set mysteries, maybe start off with none, meaning that I'm going to need to import useState. Right? I'll bring in useState. And what I'll do here is something like mysteries.map. Maybe I just want to take each mystery and render out a p tag that has the mystery name for right now. And at the moment, there are no mysteries, so nothing happens. If I do the exact same thing that I did before, which is to make the request, can make the request using Axios, but instead of making a request to pyramids, I make my request to pyramids and maybe slash, and then the ID that I want to make the request to. So this is match.params ID. I forgot the $sign. It's funny, Peter, you're like so quiet that I hear it in my head. It's like I forgot the $sign, and then Peter whispered $sign, and I'm like, I need the $sign. Would you kindly put a $sign in there? And then I'll want to set the pyramids with the mysteries from the API. I can design my API on the back end however I want. I might have made a mysteries controller where maybe I put in a query that says for the pyramid of this thing. That's something that I can totally do. I'm imagining that maybe with this API, though, I don't just want to return mysteries for the pyramid, but I want to return other data. So to keep myself a bit more flexible, I'll just say, get me all the pyramid data. Right? So, you know, there's a couple different ways that you can design this. I'm saying pyramids slash, and then I want to set those mysteries in there. Mysteries. At the moment, I expect there to be some kind of error because there's no such route on the back end. There's no such route, so I could go to my routes, pyramids, or rather not there's no such route, but there's nothing there to handle it. In my pyramids controller, there isn't a def show. So if I make a show, then I could say, hey, the pyramid that you're looking for, well, that's pyramid find with the parameters that you put in. Right? So this is very similar to what you did in Jungle. Right? And if you need a refresher on that, just go back to Jungle and look at how getting parameters from the URL looks. I don't want to go too deep into this because for the people doing Express stuff, it's going to be different. Right? But in some way, I'm going to need to go fetch the stuff. Whether I'm using Active Record or whether I'm using Connects, I need to fetch it and then ultimately put together a response. So maybe JSON, and I want to send back maybe the mysteries being that pyramid's mysteries. And now, on this end here, what I want to be able to get is the mysteries for the thing. Apparently not working. I could check to see what's happening in my server. And I'm getting something like, oh, I can't find the pyramid with ID 12. That's actually good, because there aren't any pyramids with the ID 12. But if I was to go to just my straight up home page and click on one of the pyramids that what? Oh, right, I visited them, and now they're purple. All right, you know what? There's also, do you see this? Is this good? It's not very good. What's happening? It's constantly loading, and what is it constantly getting? Constantly getting the pyramids. So we're going to solve both of these issues. First, we'll do the purple, and then we'll do this thing here. That'll quickly make you, spend a lot of money on Heroku. So we're going to see first. Let's do the purple, just because that drives me nuts. So app, not home screen. Let's pick another nice color, green. Did you say red? All right. Peter's chaotic evil. So here's red. Beautiful. So nice. So nice. I'm still getting a million requests, though. How many times do I want the requests to be made? Once. OK. How many times in my home screen have I written the request? Once. When does the request happen? No, let's go a little bit simpler though. When does the code that I write in here happen? When the component gets rendered. OK, when do components render? What's that? Every time something changes. Is my thing changing anything? It's changing how many pyramids there are. So what I have here is code that, sure, goes and fetches the pyramids, sets the pyramid's state, and then my component says, oh, I got new stuff, and reloads itself. So it immediately then reruns this again, and then it gets stuck in that loop. So in order for me to make this not happen, I need to say that this is an effect that only happens once. Use effect. That was the thing that I mentioned before. Use effect, you can pass it a callback. And what I'm going to do in here is, I'm going to say use effect is going to run this. And the other thing that you get to say with use effect is when should it run? It should run every time that one of these things changes. If I only want it to run once, I can run it with an empty array. So now what this is saying is only run that effect a single time. We're going to see when this refreshes, if I take a look at what happens here, this is no longer freaking out at me. Right? So, no, great, my computer's frozen again. Oh, my life. Just so good. There we go. So it only runs once. I do get an error, though. Every child in a list should have a unique key prop. That's because I didn't do that. But you can add a key. Or rather, it's a warning. You could ignore it. It's going to cause you errors in the future, though. So just make sure that they always have a unique key prop whenever you're loading something in a list. So for example, here, every one of my pyramid entries needs to have the key, which is going to be my p.id. And now I've got my great pyramid, Carlos pyramid, Steve G's pyramid. Look at that, no warnings. Right? I don't care about these ones. Those are fine. And if I was to look back at my Rails stuff, it's no longer freaking out. Right? When I go to a particular pyramid, I get, there's a mummy, and who made it for this pyramid? I go to Carlos, and I get why in JavaScript. And Steve G's is, why is it so amazing? What's it made out of? Right? Maybe I also want to show the description. So let me just do that real quick. We're just going to go pyramid screen. Don't just show the name. We'll show like a div. We'll show a div. And the div is going to have name and a description. So, boop, boop. I'm lost here. That is, there we go. And so the name and the description. Ultimately, what I also want is a key for everything that gets generated as well, so m.id. So what I get is, there is a mummy. It's in the title, really. Who made it? It's difficult to make. So I still get this. Same thing. Does somebody want to coach me through how I solve this problem? What's that? Sure. What does that mean? Where do I have to write that? Around Axios get. So use effect. I get to take this, move it up in, and I get to say, what do I have to say here? Empty array. Right. Use effect with an empty array, and specifically, I also need to say import use effect. It stopped. There you go. So EgyptMysteries.com. This is a fairly complicated app. We've got screens, right? We're working with React hooks. We've got a backend written in Rails here. There's queries happening. You could take this in all kinds of directions here. I have not made a thing that makes new pyramids or makes new mysteries for pyramids. You could do that by making new routes and by making things that make post requests instead of get requests. Right? Put, delete, you can do all that stuff. Right? I think you'll get to explore a lot of that through your projects, so I don't really want to show that right now. Also because it's 12:02, right? Woo. I know that we covered a lot of stuff. This isn't necessarily the kind of lecture that I want you to go away from going like, I know exactly how to do that. I saw a lot of people taking notes, which is really good. And the particular notes that I want you to think about are like, where should I look for more resources? For example, let's look into React Router. Let's look into Axios. Let's look into cores. I showed you how to turn on cores, or turn off cores rather, for Rails. Some of you are working with Express. Maybe that's going to be a problem. Maybe Google, how do I do core stuff in Express? Right? That's what I want you to take away from this lecture. Right? Obviously, it's been recorded. So if you want to watch it as like the workflow for how I've gone setting up this stuff, then that's good too. It has been recorded, so that's good. So that'll be out in a sec. I don't at the moment have notes for this because we did this live. So are you happy with me just immediately giving you the code and then like over the day? Actually, I can't during the day because we're having meetings from like now until 5. Sometime towards the end of the day, I'll write up some stuff and send it out probably on Slack. Does that sound good? Was this helpful? All right. If it's not, by all means, write it in the feedback so that I can refine this some more. Right? Cool. Are there any questions at the moment? Anything that needs to be immediately addressed? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. As opposed to the A tag? Yeah. Well, I mean, the real benefit of it is that, this is not necessarily something I showed, but if we have in the app, say I make another, like a secondary router, that like, how am I going to do this? Yeah, you can have multiple parts of your application have routing. So for example, I might have a little menu thing over here, right? And when I change that, it shouldn't change the other stuff, right? Or when I change stuff here, it shouldn't change that. If I use A tags, when I click on it, it refreshes the page and it resets the state again, right? When I use links, it doesn't refresh the page. It just changes the components that it needs to, right? That's the main thing. Or I guess the simplest way that I could show this is if I have an input, type text. I have an input in here, and there it is. If these are link tags, then that input stays the same. Right? If instead those are A tags, so where'd you go? This is home screen. If these were instead href tags, then as I fill this thing and I click on stuff, it clears that. That's the main thing. Good? Cool, cool, cool. Any other questions? One. Yeah, cool. Thanks, everyone. I think I have meetings with y'all planned from, does it start at noon? Noon? So we'll do 12:15 then. Because every meeting's going to be 45 minutes, so we'll just back-to-back those. Hey, any question?
Yeah, sorry. So I thought, didn't you mention that we're gonna go through using like third-party APIs with React?
Oh, well, I meant working with APIs, as in your own API. I mean, if you wanted to work with a third-party API, like
Would it just be the same?
exactly the same. Your API to your front end is a third-party API.
I see.
So you can look at the documentation for a third-party API and use it in the exact same way that you're using your own.
All right. And so that means not just APIs. I can use like all kinds of like node packages with npm.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I can use all kind of gems with Ruby.
All kinds of stuff. Yeah.
Sick. Okay.
So here the two packages that I installed were the React router.
Right.
Right? Well, I guess Axios as well, and I even did styled components.
Yeah.
So pretty much any npm package that doesn't have to do with server stuff. So, you know, if you have a package like I can't install Express on React.
That makes
Yeah.
sense.
Right. I don't know. I haven't tried.
Right?
Maybe.
Yeah, because I saw one of the past projects and they used like two kinds of backend, and I was like kind of confused.
No, then you can have two different backends that are running, so that your like notice that my front end doesn't even care how many backends there are. Say I had information somewhere else. When I make my request, where'd you go? My request, like it could be a request to this, and then I can make a second one that's a request to somewhere else. Like, oof, where'd you go? A request to somewhere else to get other data. Like that's all good.
Right.
Right. So it's all good.
Also.
For working with third-party APIs, though, if you want, like individually, I can show you that later. Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure this was covered like a couple weeks ago, but like, what are the differences between like using like queries, like the URL, and using like routes?
Virtually none, I guess. Routes are actual named things on your backend, so there is a route somewhere for this. A query is so that I can pass extra information. So it still goes to this route, but here's a little bit of extra information that's needed. Usually you would use this for filtering. So say I want to get not all pyramids, but only pyramids where mystery count is 5. Right? It's easier to write this like this than to figure out how that should be part of the URL or of the path there.
So if I were to implement some kind of search function, it would be nice to have it as a
Probably.
Okay.
Exactly, yeah. That's why they call them query parameters, because they're mostly for asking for things through like a filter or something like that.
Sorry, just a quick one. If I wanted to have like search by tags, and let's say a pyramid had like different tags.
You can have an array in your query params.
Oh, no way.
Yeah,
Okay,
it doesn't exactly look like this. I think it looks more like 0 and whatever.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to look up exactly how to format that though, because off the top of my head, I think I've done it like this before.
Yeah.
Or you don't even need query parameters. If you're doing a post request, then you can put it in the body, and that's okay too.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
Just like asking like why we have to why the thing is just keep on refreshing. Like I don't get why.
Why React keeps on refreshing?
Yeah, I mean like those like requests.
Oh, the requests that we're just going like up. So the thing is, with hooks, I don't have access to something like on component did mount or constructor to say that this thing should only happen once. So any code that I write in here by default, like if it's just written by default, it'll run every single time that the component runs on the screen. Like every time that for some reason it updates. So here, right now, it'll only update once because it's just showing me the thing once. Components will update anytime props change or anytime state changes. So if the prop changes, then the component will redraw itself. And if the state changes, then the component will redraw itself. This line here, I'm saying make a GET request and then update the state. And since that updates the state, then the component redraws itself.
And it will call this function again.
Exactly. So it's constantly calling itself. So, say, you know, in a class-based component, what I would do is I would put this inside of constructor or component did mount, right? So that it only runs once. With hooks, what I can do is I can put it around this use effect, and I can say only run it anytime these things change. So say for example, I was to run this every time somebody changed the value of some search or something, right? Like there's a search that's being controlled by an input. It's not something I did, but I could watch the search. If I don't put anything in here, then it'll only run once. It's like saying on component did mount. Cool. Cool.
So I was a little late, so I missed the beginning of the lecture. How did you said something about create React app. That's what you used to create the
Exactly.
boilerplate, right?
Yeah.
How did you connect it to Rails?
So the connection to Rails is pretty anticlimactic. Like there isn't actually anything special you have to do.
Right.
This is your React app, and this is your Rails app.
Yeah.
Your Rails app exposes some routes, right? And previously, your routes were being connected to by the browser. Right. Just you'd go to this page, you go to this page.
Yeah.
And these routes were, when somebody made a GET request or POST request, it would send back some HTML after doing some work over here. What we do with Rails is instead of sending back HTML, we tell it to send back some JSON so that people can make requests and get data back. Right? So that's the change that we do on the back end is instead of rendering views, we say render JSON. Okay. And then on the front end, just like you did with Ajax, right? Instead of using Ajax, we can use either fetch or I brought in a package called Axios, right? And that'll let me make requests. And I can make requests to anywhere. Like I can make requests to other third-party APIs or whatever, or to my own API. So on the front end, there actually isn't anything special that I need to do. I just say make the request. For the back end, what I had to do was say that the back end was opening up to allow cross-origin resource sharing.
Yeah.
Right. So I had to untoggle. This was toggled. I untoggled it.
Yeah.
And you install a gem or untoggle the gem for rack cores. Yeah. In Express, it's going to be slightly different. There is something I didn't show in class. Instead of doing all the core stuff, the easiest way to do it is to make this person pretend as if, like, say this one's running on 3001, and this is running on 3000. You can make this thing pretend like it's running on 3001 by going into the package JSON, and at the bottom of it, or really anywhere, you can write in proxy. And then, comma, proxy, and then something like localhost 3001. Right. So if you Google proxy package JSON, that'll show you how that works.
Okay. Yeah. So, and also, when you were creating this whole boilerplate, what did you do?
You run create React app, and then just the name of it. You're talking about the Rails side?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did
That's just it.
It just comes with it?
So you have you should have a command called create React app already installed.
Yeah.
If you don't, you can npm install it.
Yeah.
And then to generate the project, you just go create React app like that, and it'll bootstrap it for you.
Even with all the Rails stuff?
No, the Rails stuff, these are two different projects. So this one I made a new Rails project, and this one I made a new React project. So that's the thing, the distinction is like, these are two separate projects. I could technically have my thing built up of a billion different APIs, like a billion different Rails projects. Like this could be Rails, this could be Express, this could be Go, this could be Django or whatever, right? Like, yeah, this could be like something else. And I can make this talk to all of them, right? And they don't care about each other. Right? When you go work somewhere, your apps are probably going to be made up of lots of smaller apps. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That clarifies a lot. Thanks.
Cool. No problem. Right. Yeah, so it's 12:15. I will make sure that y'all get like 45 minutes. Did David say what room we're in? Do you mind asking David what room we're supposed to be in? Thanks.